All right, so before we begin, I want to pose a question to you. Why are students grouped in classes simply based on age? Is there a reason, or is it just convention now? For me, when I started this project, this was a question that was on my mind, and I couldn't really stop thinking about it, so I began to wonder if there's an alternative to grade-based schooling and assessment as we know it right now. So my project will walk you through this idea that I have about a new education system or a way to avoid a lot of the issues that we have in school today. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that I can convince you that there might be some value to what my thoughts are. I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. All right, so I named this education system Inte Grade because my intentions for it is to be able to integrate all students into classrooms of a sort, a little bit different than how we know it now. So we'll get into the philosophy of the school, and then I'll take you on a school tour, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the details about how it would work and how I would even go about implementing this crazy idea. So we'll give it a go. All right, so the philosophy. What is this school? My intentions would be that there are no grades. So instead of grades, I propose that there would be different levels of mastery. So this school essentially, if we were to look at a traditional school, this would be a school that goes from kindergarten to grade 6. But in this case, there would be 8 levels. So we're kind of adding a grade or adding a level in this case. But it would be from level 1 to level 8. And these students would be placed into levels based on basically observations at first, is what I would imagine. And then we would go into the classrooms and students would interact and teachers would be able to converse about where they think the student's at in their ability and if they're in the right placement or not. I think it would be a little tricky at the beginning to start it, but I'll go into more of the philosophy so you understand why I'm thinking about this. So instead of having teachers adapt their teaching method as we do now to suit all student ability, in this school, we would be adapting context to match every learning level. So say we have a level 1. They're learning the same thing as level 2s and level 3s all the way up to level 8. But the teacher's job is to bring that content down to their level or up to their level if it's a little bit too simplistic for them. This is so that teachers don't teach the test as we do now. This is so that every student gets what they need at the level that they need it, but it's still content that's interesting to them and engaging and really worthwhile for their life as a human. I think right now the most valuable thing for me to do is to show you what the layout of the school looks like. It looks basically the same as a normal school, or a traditional school, as we would say. And then I'll go through and show you why the classrooms are different and where the benefits are in this type of schooling system. Just for a quick tour, we'll start at the very bottom. If you can see on the bottom right-hand corner, there's a bus loop, and then just above that, a little bit to the left, is the Great Hall. So this is an area where the parents would come in the mornings or in the afternoons, and they can mingle with one another, with other parents, with students, with teachers. There will be couches and coffee and food, so people can really enjoy one another's company. And you can see if you look to the right of the Great Hall, is the library. So you can see this Great Hall is quite a big space, but I really want it to be there because it connects the students to their family, to the school, so they really know that their family's always welcome and they're really a big part of the school. If the parents weren't there and if they weren't involved, it wouldn't be the same. So just beyond that, you can see there's kind of 3 lines which are supposed to be bleachers, and why I put this here is because I wanted a really big atrium with lots of light and just a really nice open space for kids to be in all day. And why I put this at the center is because if I was to build a school, my faith is a huge part of who I am, and I would put that at the center of my school and really incorporate it. So after parents come into the Great Hall and bring their kids, this would be a space where they can sit with her kids and just get them ready for the day. And there would be maybe a presentation in the morning, maybe 20 minutes or less, of somebody talking about their faith journey, or maybe reading scriptures or telling a story about something that happened that is uplifting, or just gets the kids their minds and their heart ready for the day, and that it really starts on a positive note. Besides that, you can see there's a large theater or stage space, and there's a dance studio, and there's a music room and a gymnasium, and then what I call the creation room. And we'll get into the classrooms in a moment here, so I won't elaborate, but we'll go on. All right. So instead of classrooms, I've named these laboratories because a laboratory is a room or building that's equipped for experiments, research, or teaching, which I thought was really interesting because a classroom should be equipped for all the learning and the teaching that needs to happen in it. So to the bottom right, we have our exploration lab, which coupled with it is a greenhouse. And my vision for it is to have vertical farming in there so kids can grow something and really have an investment in the classroom itself. And then later on, maybe they could sell them to their parents or just have a little market with what they grow in the greenhouse. So that's kind of a connection to the exploration lab for them there. Then we have the living room, which I think is a really neat space because what I would do with it is it would be kind of like a foods room and I don't know, just anything that we do when we live. So I would really focus on, for kids, practical skills that they would need in the future. So cooking, of course, but again, on their level. And then maybe even things like sewing or knitting, kids who are interested in that kind of thing. Or for boys, maybe building something or fixing something, practical life skills. So that's why we call it the living room. And it's kind of a double meaning, I guess, because it kind of comes alive as the year goes on. Then next to that, we have the history laboratory, which is, of course, kind of like social studies. Then we have the creation station, which is essentially the art room. And to the right of that is the logics lab. And it's kind of there also so that we can incorporate math and art together because I think that there's a lot of value there. And then just to the right, we find Area 51, which I kind of named it that because it would kind of be a kids-free zone. This is an area for teachers to go and to do their planning and to just interact with one another. And there would be this whole school, the outside is surrounded by windows, so they would be able to write their ideas on the window and collaborate. And it's just an area for teachers, not just a staff room, because I don't want them to be separate from the school, but I really want them, they're an essential part, obviously, so I really wanted them to have a space just as important as all the others. All right, so moving on, there's the literacy lab, which is connected to the library, so all the resources that are needed are basically at their fingertips. Also, I go into a little bit more detail about the classroom setup in a bit here. I'll show you what they would look like inside. So I'll hold off right now, and I'm just going to read you a quote that I thought was really important. So it reads, "The wider the range of possibilities we offer children, the more intense will be their motivations and the richer their experiences. We must widen the range of topics and goals, the types of situations we offer, and their degree of structure, the kinds and combinations of resources and materials, and the possible interactions with things, peers, and adults." All right, so let's take a look inside one of the learning labs. The above picture is the side view. As you can see, I've put the blueprint on the top right corner, so you can kind of see there's 3 quadrants. So the idea is that each teacher still has their own classroom, but they're surrounded by windows, so all the ideas can go onto the windows. Kids can write on them if they want to add ideas or if just anything. It's kind of like a whiteboard, but at least it has scenery outside for kids, that it's not dark and dull in a classroom. So on the bottom, you see how it would essentially look from inside the school looking into the classrooms. There would be a shared resource area is the front part of the room where teachers would find anything that they need for their subject they're teaching. And then to the back is their own teaching quarter, as I said a moment ago. So it's kind of a little bit different. It's not like a dual teaching classroom. They each have their own classrooms, but it's not that they're isolated from one another. They can do team teaching if they choose. They can teach their own lessons, but they have all these resources, again, right at their fingertips for when they need them, if they need them. All right, so we also have the movement labs. When I initially think about movement, I used to think about gym and just sports. But now I kind of realize that there's a lot more to it. We could do theater and drama and dance and even how one of the thoughts that I had was to have an outdoor rink for in winter, so the kids don't just have to be inside, but there's an outlet for them to go outside, and the movement that they're able to do during the day to get their minds off of the academic content would also help to minimize a lot of behavior issues that you would have in a traditional school as well. Here we have the creativity lab. So like I said before, there's the creation station and there's the music room. This is, we really want to impart that intelligence is diverse, dynamic, and distinct. So it doesn't mean that you're just academically gifted. Their gifts go beyond academics, and we want all kids to find their talents. So they have all these outlets to be able to experience the world around them and to be able to express themselves. And kind of to go with Reggio again, it's just like they have their 100 languages that they can express themselves with, and this kind of, their environment just allows them to be able to do so. So I'm going to go on to read you another quote that I thought was amazing as well. So, and then we'll carry on with the presentation. So, creativity emerges from multiple experiences, coupled with a well-supported development of personal resources, including a sense of freedom to venture beyond the known. So this is really what I want to impart on students, is that they have the freedom to go beyond what the normal bounds are. They can go on and they can think outside of the box, and they have all the resources to do so if they want to. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the learning cohorts. So I read about a school, and I believe it's in Saskatchewan, and I think it's called Sacred Heart, but I'm not completely sure. And what they had done is they put grades together. I think it was a grade 1 and 4, a 2 and 5, and a 3 and 6. So there were 3-year differences between them. And the reason they did so, it was an inner city school, and there was a lot of gangs forming between the students and grades, and it wasn't a very functional environment, and the kids weren't enjoying their time, and there was a lot of bullying going on. So they broke kids up into these new grades, and they put the grades together, but that you would never think to put together, because what would you do with 3-year differences? But what happened is the bullying stopped, and kids got along, and they had buddies, and the older kids really enjoyed having the younger kids in their classroom, and they really worked with one another. So that was kind of what made me wonder why we break kids into grades in the first place. And then I started thinking about these learning cohorts, and I just thought it'd be neat, because then they would still have the levels are set up in a way that they still interact with their peers. And when we get to the schedule, I'll talk about Wednesdays. So right now I'll just say Wednesdays, and you'll understand a little bit later. But they have a lot of time to interact with their own age group as well. It's not that they're just broken up into these levels, but for them, when they're in their learning classes, their academic, the classes that are rooted in academics, I should say, they're with kids who are on their same level. The skill sets are similar, but it's not that they just stay in that skill set. They have the other level that's just above them right next door all the time, so that they're able to interact with them, and they can work with one another, and they can break down those barriers where kids when their self-esteem gets bruised, and they're not as good as their buddies who are in their class, or they're not as good as this, and they just can't do this. They don't have to face those things, and not that they need to be sheltered from that completely, because there's still value in those, in learning where our weaknesses are. But kids are able to be in a level 1 for social, or in a level 3 for math, that's where they excel. So they're still being challenged in the areas that their strengths are, but they're developing their weaknesses at the level that they should be. They're not just being forced to move from grade 2 to grade 3, or being held back and feeling bad about themselves when they're being held back in grade 2. They're working on their level that they should be. And if they have an insight, and they really start to understand, and they're able to move on to the next level, they don't have to wait a whole year to move on, because the way it's going to be set up is that every month there's a theme, and how I explained before, this theme or this context, whatever they're learning about, every level will be learning about that, or at least 1 to 4 will be learning about that, and then 5 to 8 might be learning something a little bit more advanced. But essentially, a child who's in level 2 can move to level 3 at the end of a month, because they'll be learning the same content but at a different level, and then they'll be able to move on to level 3 when they're ready for that challenge. So what I'm really trying to do is to focus on ability, not disability, and to strengthen each student where they have their weaknesses and where they have their strengths, so that we're not holding them back and we're not moving them forward when they're not ready, and they're interacting with adults and students who are a little bit older and teachers. They have everything at their fingertips that they need to do well. So, and what I also really like about this setup is the teachers who teach a subject, they teach out of passion. They don't teach because they have to teach grade 3. Maybe their passion is grade 3, but these teachers who are really good at math teach all the students math, because for me to go and teach math, I won't do it the same as someone who really loves and understands math, because my struggle is math. So why would I want to teach somebody if I'm not even confident in it? So I would hire teachers who are really passionate, really good at teaching one specific subject, and they just have to adapt it to the levels of students, which essentially is what they would be doing in a normal classroom in a traditional school anyways. Now they're just doing it for all students, but they have the same level of students in their classroom. Additionally, why I think this is so valuable is that in a traditional grade-based school, teachers have to adapt their teaching method to each student, where in this Inte Grade school, they adapt content to each student's mastery level. So we're focusing more on the student and their abilities than anything. We don't really focus so much on the curriculum. They're still learning curriculum. They're still learning the skills that they would be learning from the curriculum. They're still learning the content, but they're learning it in a broader sense, in more of a realistic, practical, meaningful way about how they would apply it to their life and their future. So down to the nitty-gritty, we just have to talk about a little bit how we would schedule students. So my idea here is that because we have these classrooms that are broken into 2, what I would do is in the morning, of course we have our little assembly, and then they would go, so we'll focus on Monday and Tuesday. Students who are in level 1, 2, and 3 kind of hang out together, which makes sense because there could be a 4, maybe even a 5 year difference in some cases, and I think going beyond that is a little bit extreme, especially for a learning environment. So for say we're going to history class, and then the 1s and 2s share that space together. So the 1s would be on the left or on the right, and the other one would be on the opposite side. And then they have their shared space where they can interact, and they're kind of all on the same age level, so that it's a really meaningful interaction for them. Then if we're looking at period 1 here, it says history 1 and 2, and while the history 1 and 2s are in class, then the level 3 and 4 students are in movement class. Now movement class could be either drama or dance or gym, and lots of different elements in each of those. And then the 1s and 2s go to movement, and the 3s and 4s would go to history. And they would have joined lunch, which would include the 5, 6, 7, 8s as well. Then after lunch, they would have science, and then they would have art, and vice versa if they're in the other level. But why I did this is so that they have an academic course, and they have a movement class. They have something to kind of get them back into just being a kid. And they have lunchtime, and they have lunch with everyone, so they get to interact all over again. And then they would either go to science or art. And why I set it up like this is so that on the opposite sector, so the Thursday and the Friday, whoever had an academic class first in the morning now has a movement class in the morning, so that they're opposite. They don't always start academic and then they're drained. They start with the movement, or they start with the academic and then it swaps. And then the afternoon matches the morning. So again, on Thursday or Friday, the kids who have mathematics first would have music next, or they would have music first and then mathematics. So that's how we kind of scheduled that one. And I'll go on and I'll talk about a little bit with the older levels, and then we'll talk about Wednesdays. Alright, so you can see with the levels 5 through 8, their setup is exactly the same. They have either an academic and then a non-academic, academic, non-academic, or vice versa. but it switches on the Thursday and Friday so that they have a balance of both. Now, what I really like about this is Wednesdays, they don't have any academic classes and they don't have any specific classes they need to go to. So I'm thinking every Wednesday would be a little bit different. So say the history teacher really wants to take their two groups, well, essentially 4 levels, they want to take them and they want to go on a field trip. They have Wednesdays to do that. Or kids who are in the older grades might be going on a camping trip, so they might need the Wednesday to prepare to teach kids how to set up a tent, how to start a fire. They might need that day for those life skills that they're trying to build. Maybe it's that these kids, the whole school goes together and goes to maybe an old age home, and they spend the day there and they interact with these old folks, and they really just get to be valuable citizens, and they get to see people who are way beyond their peer group. They get to see all these ages and all this life knowledge and wisdom that gets passed on to them. They get exposed to that. Maybe stuff that kids would never be able to do with their families. Maybe they go to the mustard seed. And some kids might do that with their families and some might not. So this gives them the opportunity to do so. Last thing that I want to point out about the schedule here is that I can't really go back to the other slide now, but how the literacy was set up on the other one is that the 1, 2, 3s, and 4s have literacy on the Thursday, Friday. These levels have them on Monday, Tuesday. So the teacher essentially has the morning to teach and the afternoon to prep for the next lesson. And same thing with the Thursday, Fridays. They teach in the morning and they have the afternoon to prep. So this is really 4 hours of prep time on Monday, Tuesday, and 4 hours on Thursday, Friday. And then Wednesdays, all the teachers are required to be there for their field trips, or if they're sticking around at the school, anything that needs to be done, the teachers are there all of Wednesday. So maybe even if it's just kids who are working on projects that they need a little bit of extra help with, teachers are there for them. So that's kind of how the setup would work. And then I just want to talk a little bit about the community that we're hoping to create. I promise this is the last thing. So like I talked about, the church assembly will be open to parents, and I really wanted to translate, I guess more so, it would transform into a student work area for the rest of the day. So it's just a huge open space where kids can leave their classroom, they can sit and have a little bit of quiet time or work on a project, or, they can just have that space for themselves. Then we already discussed the Great Hall, how it's a waiting area for parents, and I really want to stress that because that connection from home to school and parents and students and teachers is really valuable, and that's what I want to stress in this community. Then another thing is there would be music and dance performances where parents can attend and students get to showcase what they're learning and what they're doing. Then there's art shows and tournaments for kids who are really sporty, and they're gifted in that sense. That's something that I want them to put on display for their parents too, and they can be proud about that. Then the other thing that we kind of discussed was the greenhouse that has vertical farming, and the community garden where parents are always welcome to go in and see what's going on, and if they need something like a carrot, if they need some carrots for their home, and they can take them, and that's what it's there for. It's for them to use and to interact with their kids. And then taking that further, we could have student markets where they could produce some baking from the living room that they would be in, and they could put on like a grocery market or art market where they can sell their creations. And then more so to do with assessment, there would be monthly parent-teacher-student conferences. Some of them could be student-led, some of them wouldn't have to be, but we would always have portfolios where kids can demonstrate what they're learning and what they've experienced and what they really like, maybe what they didn't like, what they want to do in the future, and we just have that communication between parents and students and teacher. And again,